These wheels and tires may look cool, but there's three big reasons why I went with this tire and this rim. Want to know what they are? As someone who likes to get out there and camp where most people don't and see things most people won't, the first logical performance upgrade for the GX was bigger tires and off-road rims. In this video, I'll show you why I chose the Toyo Open Country AT3s and the Falcon Offroad T2 rims. I'll also show you all the technical features of each item and, of course, do the weigh-in so that you know how much weight you gain going from something like that to something like this. So if you're ready to see all that, let's step back in time for just a second and I'll show you what I started with. My 2005 Lexus GX470 started with these slightly upgraded rims and tires. I pulled them off of the first GX I bought, and you can kind of see that story in episode 1 of this series. The original stock tires are 265/65 17s. These are 265/70 17s. Slightly bigger, I gained about half an inch of ground clearance by swapping to these. The wheels are from the 5th gen Toyota 4Runner series SR5 trim level. The tires are Goodyear Wrangler ATS, and this particular model was a fairly common OEM all-terrain tire for that era. And nothing against Goodyear, but this particular model isn't a true off-road worthy all-terrain tire. Like pretty much any OE spec tire that comes on a luxury SUV and even some base model full-size pickup trucks, this is an SL rated or standard load rating tire, which means it's a 4-ply equivalent when, for comparison, a C rated or E rated tire is anywhere from 6 plies to 10 plies. They might look the part, but SL rated tires are just not up to the task of real off-roading. The sidewalls have thinner rubber and fewer plies, so they're just more prone to cuts, tears, and punctures. I've seen it happen many, many times. So basically, these tires don't give me the confidence to get out there and explore more rugged terrain. Plus, I wanted something bigger for more ground clearance anyway. So it's the perfect excuse to upgrade. If you haven't seen it already, we did an article comparing 13 of the most popular all-terrain tires for overlanding. We compared everything from weights to load rating and more, and there's a link in the description if you want to check that out. There are a lot of good tires on the list, so why did I choose the Toyo Open Country AT3s? 3 reasons. First, they're a very popular overland tire, and I couldn't find anything negative about them in any of the reviews or forums found online. Second, they're reasonable in weight. They kind of sit mid-pack in everything else that we compared. And third, because I talked to them at Overland Expo East, and I came away really impressed and intrigued by their manufacturing method, which is pretty unique in the automotive tire category. Here's a little blurb with them explaining it.
Yeah, so what makes our tires so special, I think, is our manufacturing process. A lot of tire companies, most tire companies actually, take the tread rubber and they wrap it all the way around the tire and then they pinch it off. So then there's a giant part of rubber that's overlapped, and then that makes it harder to balance the tire. Like when you mold it, it gets rid of most of that, but then there's still a heavy section of the tire. With our process, it's called Atom, and it's a patented process, but we kind of like extrude the rubber in a small band, and we go all the way around the tire until we get to the end. And so now we only have like a 1-inch portion of rubber that's overlapped. And so that makes our tires very uniform, very round, and really easy to balance.
So I reached out and Toyo sent us a set to review. Now, full disclosure, I did not pay for these tires. They were sent as editorial samples for media review. I'm not an ambassador, I'm not sponsored, and I have no skin in the game whether you buy these tires or not. This is purely my unbiased impressions of the tires based on my personal experience with them. And this is part 1 because I wanted to go ahead and show off the technical features, talk about the weight and all the other things that made me want to try these tires to begin with. A longer term review after I have several thousand miles on them will come a little bit later, but we are going to get these dirty before the end of this video. All right, let's dive into it. I'm testing the 285/70 17 size. Toyo claims their diameter is 32.8 inches. And once mounted on 9-inch wide rims and inflated to the recommended PSI, they measure 32.5. I went with a C-rated tire because this vehicle is never going to get super heavy. These have a load index of 2,755 pounds each, and that means theoretically they could support a vehicle that weighs 11,000 pounds. I promise you this will never get anywhere near close to that. It has a gross vehicle weight rating of 6,200 pounds, so these tires give me a lot of room above and beyond that to handle just about anything I'm going to throw at them. So you might be thinking, but Tyler, the SL tires that you started with have a load index of 2,500 pounds. Isn't that enough? Well, load range and load index are two very different things. The load index is the amount of weight they can handle, but the load rating or range is the SL versus C. And an SL tire, as I mentioned, has fewer plies and much thinner rubber. So they're just not as tough of a tire, even if they can handle that weight. C-rated tires have more plies inside and thicker rubber in the sidewall, so they offer a lot more puncture and cut resistance. So basically, if you're overlanding, you want at least a C-rated tire. And it's worth noting that Toyo is one of few brands that we compared that actually offers a C-rated tire in a 33-inch size. Most of the tires in this size only have an E-rated option, and honestly, unless you're just rock crawling and running through the sharpest, roughest, gnarliest stuff, or have just a really super heavy vehicle that is pushing 10,000 pounds, an E-rated tire is overkill. It's just going to be thicker and less compliant, and it's just going to ride a lot rougher. So for most of us, C-rated is what you want. Now for the weights. I got 5 tires so that I'd have a full-size spare, and they weighed in at 54.6 pounds, 54.4 pounds, 54.2 pounds, 54 pounds even, and 54.8 pounds, which is remarkably consistent and pretty decent for such a big tire. For rims, I needed something wider to fit the Toyo tires. These things require a rim between 7.5 and 9.5 inches wide, and believe it or not, those SR5 rims are only 7 inches wide, so they're just wouldn't work even if I wanted to keep them. I also wanted something lighter, but before I get into all the specs, and I will show you all of the weights and everything, I want to explain why I chose Falcon Offroad. There are a lot of wheel brands out there. Go ahead and search and try and find something, and you'll just be inundated with options. And there is also an appalling lack of technical info. I like to geek out on the details, in particular for things that are expensive and critically important to both safety and performance, of which wheels fall into that category. And when I say most brands do a really bad job of providing good technical information, I really do mean most all of them. And that includes Falcon Offroad with the data available on their website. So why did I go with these? Well, I've got 3 good reasons. First, they're impressively lightweight, lighter than anything else that I was looking at. And I'll show you the actual weights in a minute, but you should know that most off-road rims in this general category weigh around 28 pounds. Some push well over 30 pounds. That is a lot of unsprung mass and a lot of rotational weight. 2 things that I was really trying to avoid. These are under 23 pounds each, and they're affordable, which both impressed me and kind of scared me. But more on that in a minute. The second reason I went with Falcon Offroad is because they actually have a phone number on their website, and when I called, a real actual human picked up. Go ahead, look for a phone number on any Wheels website, and chances are you won't find it. And chances are if you do and you call it, nobody's going to answer. I tried calling quite a few brands, and even when I could leave a message, nobody ever called me back. The bar for customer service in the wheel realm is pretty dang low. The fact that I could get actual customer service and talk to somebody gave me a lot of confidence in this brand because I know there's somebody there. And the third reason I went with these is because after talking to them, they could justify how they got these wheels so light. And it gave me the confidence to pull the trigger, which is good because I did actually pay for these wheels. They had a sale going on, and after talking to them about this project, full disclosure, we came up with a pretty good deal, but I did pay for them, and I have the interest accruing on my credit card to prove it. So, what did they say that convinced me to go ahead and buy them? Well, the first time I asked how they were made, they said they were cast aluminum, and that honestly scared me even more. Why? Because in the hierarchy of aluminum wheels, cast is usually the cheapest, but also the heaviest. Forged wheels are more expensive, but you're generally lighter. So how do you have a cast wheel that's 20 to 30% lighter than forged wheels? That's the exact question I asked Falcon Offroad, and they replied that they actually use flow forming to manufacture their wheels. So what's the difference? To explain it, I headed back to my garage where I have a few props. The easiest way to illustrate a cast wheel is with Jello. Basically, molten metal is poured into a mold, and then it's set aside to cool. And when it comes out of the mold, it's almost a wheel. In this case, a very Pooh Bear shaped almost wheel, but you get the idea. Okay, so this wheel turned out to be a bit of a mess, but the process itself is pretty simple and inexpensive. The upside is you get a wheel that's pretty affordable. The downside is you have to use more material than other methods, so you end up with a wheel that's a little bit heavier. Forging, on the other hand, takes a solid piece of metal and basically molds it into shape, kind of like Play-Doh. The heated metal is placed over a mold, and then something like 10,000 tons of pressure is applied to smash it in there, forcing the metal to take on the shape of the mold. This process realigns the grain structure of the metal in a way that makes it stronger so they can use less material for a given strength, yielding a lighter rim. It's also less likely to crack or bend in an impact. Voila, wheel-shaped form. The downside is this takes a lot more energy and time to produce, so forged wheels are typically more expensive. There are actually two methods of forging. The first is to forge the metal into a basic round cup cylinder of metal, and then cut away the excess to make it into a wheel shape. Something like that. The second and better method is to actually press it into as close as the finished wheel shape as possible, as this aligns the grains with the shape of the wheel and means less cutting, yielding the strongest possible shape. This is a pretty crappy example, but you get the idea in that the holes for the spokes and everything else would be molded in during the forging process as opposed to cut out later. Flow forming is like a hybrid between those two. The wheel starts out as a forged or billet aluminum blank. Then it's pressed between rollers and mandrels to form it into a wheel-like shape. Voila. This process also cold works the metal, realigning the grain structure on the outer rim bed surface of the wheel. So you get the strength and durability benefits on the outside, but you still have to cut away the holes for the spokes on the inside. So you get some of the same benefits as forging, but in a little bit more cost-effective product. It's worth noting that all of these processes typically end with some amount of CNC work to get the final shape and get everything within tolerances for proper tire mounting fitment. Most wheels are also given some form of heat treatment just to make them a little bit stronger. Some of the more expensive ones get shot peening to take that just up one more little notch. And then pretty much every wheel gets either anodizing, polishing, painting, or some other finish treatment to make it look pretty. But it's the initial manufacturing method that dictates the metal's grain structure within and ultimately its strength-to-weight ratio. Okay, back to the trail. I've definitely simplified these explanations a bit, so I put a link to a very good, very descriptive article in the video's description if you want to check that out. Lastly, I couldn't find any negative reviews or bad comments in the forums about the wheels, so I felt pretty confident that they're worth trying out. This particular model is their T2, and I went with this because I like the simple, clean look. I like the big spaces because if you've ever tried to clean brake dust out of tight little nooks and crannies on some rims, you know that it's a total pain in the butt and you end up just having very dirty rims. I also don't like the fake beadlock look, and I didn't need real beadlocks. So I just wanted a cleaner look that's less cluttered, and I think not only does it look good, it'll probably remain easier to clean all the way around, and also maybe even less wind noise. The T2 comes in a few different colors, and it comes in a 0mm offset and a negative 12mm offset option. I went with 0mm offset because I wanted the bigger tires, but I wanted to minimize the amount of cutting and trimming and modifying I would have to do to make them fit. And as you get into more negative offset, you end up increasing the arc of the wheel as it turns, and you just end up having to trim and cut more. So I wanted to keep it in as much as possible, but I knew I needed to bring it out just a little bit from where it was with the other rims. All right, the next step is to get everything mounted up, but first, the weights. Falcon's claimed weight is just 22.35 pounds per rim. Mine weighed in at 22.6 pounds for all but one rim, and that other one came in at 22.4. So a bit heavier than claimed, but still very light. That's about 7 pounds lighter than the SR5 wheels, and at least a couple pounds lighter than the next lightest wheels I found in my price range. These list at $270 per wheel, but if you're not in a hurry, Falcon runs sales throughout the year, and I got these in a March sale for 25% off, so they ended up being about $200 a rim. And even at this light weight, they still have a 2,500 pound load rating, so pretty close to what the tires have and way more than my vehicle will ever weigh. So they should be fine. Time will tell, of course, so let's get them mounted and balanced and go hit the dirt. Falcon suggests checking wheel fitment on your vehicle before mounting the tires, because once you mount the rubber, you can't return them except for warranty claims. These rims are a full 2 inches wider than the ones they're replacing, and have a different offset, so I definitely needed to check. I put the rims on the car and checked clearance around all the steering and suspension parts. Then I used my floor jack to check it with the suspension compressed too. Lastly, I gave it a spin to make sure there were no clearance issues around the brake calipers. With all that clear, I had the Toyos mounted and balanced, and that's where the real fit test happens. But first, here are the combined weights. Mounted and balanced, they weighed in at 78.2 pounds, 77.8 pounds, 78.4 pounds, 77.8 pounds, and 78 pounds even. It's common knowledge that 33s are about the biggest tires the GX470 will fit without a lot of modification. My vehicle still has a stock suspension height, and even though these only measure 32.5 inches in diameter once mounted, there was still a lot of rubbing on the fender trim. In fact, it rubbed front and rear on both driver's and passenger sides. If you're going up in tire size, you definitely need to check all of these locations. If possible, it's also worth checking with your suspension fully compressed for top-out clearance too. Since I'm eventually going to add a lift kit, and since I'm not rallying this thing through jumps and whoops, I didn't worry about that here. But I was concerned about how dangerously close the tire was to the body mounts. It would almost certainly rub under braking or impact forces. So it was time to start trimming and reshaping everything. I started with a heat gun, but realized pretty quickly some of the fender liner would just need to be cut away. A quick check revealed the pinch weld would also need a little reshaping. So out came the hammer. And then a bigger hammer. And yes, this would have been a lot easier with the wheel removed. From there, I needed to trim the body mounts a bit, so I marked them off with tape as a guide. Sparks will fly, so I borrowed my son's welding gloves, jacket, and mask. And then I got smart and took the front wheel off to give me a better angle. Once cut, I filed it smooth, and eventually I'll weld a cover plate over the chop to prevent those metal edges from doing any damage. In the front, the plastic fender walls can only be reshaped so much with heat, and on an older vehicle where some of the attachment points have broken, the better solution is to trim and tuck. I created a slit, then drilled holes for zip ties and pulled it all forward. All told, this was a few hours of work that I thankfully had all the right tools to do. The end result was enough clearance for both front wheels to clear everything in a full turn in either direction. And with that, it was finally time to head off-road. My first test was the gravel and dirt on the Georgia Traverse and South Carolina Adventure Route. These are relatively tame, mostly gravel forest service roads, but with a few offshoots and unmaintained sections. I have a full video coming on this trip, but for this video I just wanted to show the tires on a few different surfaces. The Toyo Open Country AT3 tires handled gravel really well and picked up surprisingly few rocks, meaning they're pretty quiet on loose gravel but held in the corners, even at speed, really well. They did pretty good with water and a little bit of mud too. On the way back from Overland Expo West, I hit the trails outside of Sedona, which were way rockier and chunkier, with a few slick rock sections too. And then it climbed up into proper forest, with more gravel roads and some lesser used dirt trails that were covered in pine needles and twigs. Thus far, I've put about 4,000 miles on the tires, with a few hundred of those off of the pavement. Okay, if you're wondering what effect these had on my gas mileage, well, this video got a little long, so I'm doing another video that will cover all of that with a full test of the stock tires versus these. And the short answer is, yes, they use more gas. The nice thing is it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it would be, but that was mostly on highway testing. As for their performance, well, I have been really happy with these tires. I've got, like I said, about 4,000 miles on them, and a good chunk of that is off-road on a wide variety of terrains, and I've been really pleased with their performance. They're pretty quiet on the highway too, which is nice because they do have a significant tread pattern on them. They do have a decent sidewall lug, and you know, there's no drone, there's no excessive wind noise. They ride pretty quiet. Now granted, I have only scratched the surface of what I plan on doing with these, so stay tuned. If you like this video and you want to see the full long-term review of this, plus other technical videos, trail reviews, and of course show coverage from things like Overland Expo, then please hit subscribe, hit like if you like this, and if you've got questions about the tires or the wheels, leave them in the comments and I'll answer everything I can. Thanks a ton for watching, and until next time, keep adventuring.